Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So before I get into this week's episode of what I've been accomplishing in this last 2 weeks now, I owe it to you guys to tell you what is going on with the engine. So I did finally receive this engine back after 4 months just about at the machine shop, actually a little bit over 4 months. And let me show you what they did to it before I start the main video. So where to begin? We did end up doing the whole short block. I had them assemble it all there. I was originally going to do everything myself, but for the extra couple $100, I wanted him to check all the bearing clearances and stuff. And I said, while you're down there, let's just do the whole thing. And luckily, I did have him do that because 2 of the crank main journals actually were undersized a little bit, and they had to use a little bit different main bearings just to compensate for it. So one of the things I was waiting for way back when, I was waiting for the pistons and the crankshaft were on back order from Skip White because I got, if you weren't aware of this, I had the rotating assembly from Skip White. I then took everything to the machine shop and they had it then. But it took about 3 or so months just to get everything in from Skip White. And what we were thinking, due to back orders and manufacturer delays of this crankshaft and everything, they might not have manufactured everything exactly to spec as they normally would be, just due to trying to get everything back on track. So the crankshaft, it checked out okay. Everything was perfect on that besides those 2 journals on the crank. So we just added a little bit different bearings in there, and luckily the machine shop caught that. So I'm actually thankful that they actually assembled the short block for me. I also had them verify Skip White's work and gave him the bob weight chart of everything, and he ended up putting on the crankshaft and everything and balancing it. Everything was verified, so Skip White did their work correctly. I just want to have a second opinion for that, cover all my bases, just because this is a very expensive part of the project and I don't want to cut any corners. So he installed all the pistons. These are 12cc dish pistons, as mentioned before. So they degreed the cam, have the original timing chain cover on here. They sealed everything up. All the components I dropped off for them. So I had the oil pan and gave that to them. Got a new oil pump, everything. So everything is completely assembled, ready to go. He made sure all the ring clearances were fine. The pistons ended up being 0.01 in the hole. So they aren't 0.02, they are 0.01. I will end up going with a head gasket that's a little bit thicker for the quench and everything. The quench is going to be a little bit on the high range of about 0.049, but the machine shop said that that's perfectly fine. And in terms of dynamic compression ratio being about 8.34 to 1, I would rather have a trade-off of quench and then have a lower dynamic compression ratio. Static compression ratio is about 9.93 to 1, which I'll go over this more later in another video, but just as a reference of why I'm doing this sort of stuff, just for you guys that can keep up right now and know what I'm talking about. I'll explain this later, but just for those of you that are interested, that's what my plan is so far. It is a copper ringed gasket, so I am going to use aluminum heads. I already have the AFR 195s that I went with. They are down in my basement currently. So the head gasket that I'm using, the 0.039 thickness gasket, that is actually able to not leave a impression in the aluminum head. So if you ever have to unbolt those, they won't leave that depression that surrounds all of that on the head, and you won't have to remill the head or flatten it down if you ever have to take it apart. I'm waiting on some head bolts now. They should be here any day. And other than that, though, everything else really solid. I was really happy with their work besides the wait time. They pretty much said a couple months in the begin with, but ended up turning out to 4, but whatever. Whenever they started my actual engine, they knocked this whole thing out in about 4 days. So they were pretty fast and accurate. They caught a lot of things on the way. I do have a retrofit hydraulic roller camshaft in here right now. So they put the cam button on here, measured it, and they put cam locking plates on as well. All new bearings and stuff for the cam and all that, of course, they did too. So pretty much I just have to assemble these heads. I will be doing the rocker arm geometry myself, and in order to measure for the correct push rod length. So I'm going to be doing that whenever I get the head gasket in. Clean everything up, don't mind the oil because they did prime it and put in some break-in end oil. This is a 6-quart oil pan, so I did have a 3D3 stroker clearance pan. I saved the original windage tray and they shimmed it on the bottom, so all that is in place with the proper oil pan clearance to the oil pump clearance of the screen. Yes, I did make sure that this engine was mine when I got it back. I took a lot of pictures of this stamping just to see any variations, even though this machine shop I trust a lot, but sometimes, you know, maybe they accidentally grabbed a different block or something. But yep, this is definitely my engine. So once I put everything together and paint it, I'm going to carefully transport it back in about 2 weeks from now to the same machine shop. They have an engine dyno there. I'm going to see not only how much power and torque everything makes, but we're going to tune it and everything too. So everything's going to be mine, my carburetor, fuel pump, everything like that. So I'm just going to have a drop-in ready engine, true turnkey engine. Everything's gonna be broken. The rings will be seated and everything on the engine dyno. So I'll just have to slap it in the car, hook everything up, wire it, and she should be ready to fire up. It's kind of at a standstill, so I really didn't have too much content to give you guys, unfortunately, just because I was waiting on the engine, and just I pretty much did everything but paint the exterior of this car, which I didn't want to do at this moment. So I was at a standstill for a little bit, so I apologize for the lack of content, but we're going to get back into it now in full force. So without further ado, let's get back to this week's episode, which is all about the interior reinstallation of that and a couple other little things I did on the way. So appreciate you guys sticking with me, and enjoy the episode. Made a faceplate backing out of a manila folder, painted that flat black, and then just used the old one as a template. This one was all crinkled up and it didn't look as clean as this one. And of course I don't have to wait for parts, even though this is only like $20. Adds up and you have to wait for it. So put this on now and then see how everything starts to look. So here's where I left off with the interior. I have the heater box all in, and I also connected these connections up here that open and close these flaps that let the air circulate. I also got the correct gauge wire, which I found out was, I think, 16. And this is automotive wire. I tapped in because one of the mice or something chewed this wire, so I had to tap into the good one, and that was unfortunately all the way back here. So that's where I left off. Everything else needs to be put back together. So luckily I took video of everything because it's been at least probably a month since I did all this stuff and just been waiting on stuff. I also got in that new firewall padding here. Let's start probably putting the ductwork back in next, and all these brackets and everything. And I also have to fix that one part on the dash, which I'll show you what I'm going to try to use on that here in a couple minutes. Also note, I changed all of these bulbs. They are the 194 size. All you do is twist these out and turn them, pull them out, and then replace them. So they're all replaced. So I'm going to attempt to drill into the spot right here to be able to bring this down and keep it down. And I got a new reproduction set of those clips. Now what I'm going to do is use a self-tapping screw, and then I'm going to also throw in just a short one, but I'm also going to throw in some of this goop adhesive. Someone mentioned this. I never tried it before, so this takes a 3-day cure time, but I'm probably going to need to maneuver this around a little bit. So I'll use the screw to set it, and then after I get it all in place in there and everything, I'll cinch it down, let it dry overnight, and then it should be permanently bonded in the right spot right there. A little bit of a lift, but not like anything before. It was really humped up over there, so I'm hoping this will fix it. let me find a screw, put it in here, and then we'll start putting this in, test fitting it. Hopefully the first time, if it clicks in the first time, I'm going to leave it in. So I got to make sure that I have all this on here first, because you can't get to these screws when it's on there to attach this piece. So we should be set. Everything else I should be able to leave off, like this other spot over here on the right hand side and everything like that. So but actually, now I'm looking at this, I do have to attach this vent apparently, so let me do that first, and then we should be set after that. Okay, so these are what is called an exploding seatbelt. They are from 73 to 74. And what happens is this little piece right here that encompasses this GM button to release the lock, it either cracks or just breaks. And what happened to mine is it broke right in half. And it was just sitting there, just held on by these little tabs. So they sell replacement kits for these. Kind of hard to come by unless you knew what they were called. But just search exploding seatbelt kit repair, and then they should have this come up. So after this piece cracks, it basically becomes useless and you can't click in the seatbelt, which is a pretty stupid design. Usually these are metal now, and for some reason they just made them plastic in 73 to 74. So I think I figured out the way that you put this in. So the spring goes in first, this piece goes in next, just like that. And then this piece goes over top of that. And the final piece goes over one way. So the steering wheel, the common problem with these is that when they start to break down, they start to leak out and have this really sticky residue that forms on them. You can scrub it all you want. You can use Goo Gone. I use lacquer thinner. Now that holds it off for about a month or so, but eventually in the heat, it comes back and starts to be sticky again. So either left with a couple options. You could either replace the steering wheel, which I looked into that, and I don't really want to spend $200 to $250 on an OEM steering wheel. And the second option is, I don't know if it'll work, but I'm going to try to paint this. So using this color coat by SEM, 15013 is the color code on this one. In the previous videos, you probably have seen me paint various interior pieces and stuff. So I'm going to be using their product line, which includes the SEM soap with a scuff pad. This cleans it. And then there's a spray that you put on over top of that to do a final wipe and clean. You could also use adhesion promoter, which is the final step before the color coat, but I always bypass that because I just don't think that is necessary in my opinion. And everything has held up great so far from what I have done in the other videos. Now if this doesn't work, I'll change the steering wheel, but for right now I could use $250 on a lot of other stuff that I need to finish this car. So I did finally get my seat back. Everything's installed right now. I knew it wasn't going to match perfectly. It actually looks a little bit worse on the camera. It matches way better in person than the camera's picking up right now. But he did a really good job on it. Got it back. Everything lines up stitching wise. This is the color I picked out because this is the closest that I had. In the direct sunlight, it matches a lot better, but everything's just so faded. Have the vinyl that matches grain wise, but the color is just, I couldn't find a 100% dead on match. So it's definitely comfortable, and he replaced the spring and everything. He did a good job. Eventually I'll replace everything vinyl wise later on down the road, but I just want to get this thing back on the road and drive it. Now it is time to replace these blowout clips that mine didn't have on here. I actually did the other side already. This is what I'm talking about, this thing right here, which someone mentioned in the past comment on a video. These hold the window from going out at highway speeds. So I just pulled these off and then just let it hang here, which I'll show you on the other side while I riveted the new one or blowout tab back on. And here's what those rivets look like, back side of it, and right there. So what I'm gonna do is just get that belt grinder that I normally have, that 3/8 inch belt grinder, grind off those two, pop this off, and then re-rivet it on. And I'm gonna try not to drop this back half here, because I know that where this lines up is where the factory lined it up. If I don't have to take it off, then I don't have to take it off, because that's what I did with the other side. And that way my weather stripping will all be lined up correctly again. It won't be off.